It's been years since it happened. It was October 29th of 2017. The air that day was sharp enough to bite. My wife Claire and I had been arguing a lot that summer, and I thought maybe some time away from everything, away from people, might help us breathe again. I booked us a small cabin deep in the Smoky Mountains, the kind you only reach after following a twisting dirt road that feels like it's leading you off the edge of the map. The photos online made it look peaceful. Dark wood siding, a small porch, no neighbors in sight, just us, the trees and the sound of the wind. When we got there that first afternoon, everything looked exactly as promised. Too perfect, maybe. The place had clearly been redone recently. Floors gleamed, walls freshly varnished, even the porch smelled like new pine. But something about that newness in such isolation felt wrong, like someone was trying too hard to make something look untouched. We unpacked, cooked dinner, and sat out on the porch with mugs of wine while the sky went red behind the ridges. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Claire even laughed again. We turned in early, around 10. The bedroom was small but cozy. A queen bed, one lamp, and a chair sitting in the far corner, pointed directly at us. I remember standing there thinking, why in the hell would anyone put a chair there? It wasn't even a comfortable chair, just some stiff wooden thing like you'd find in an old waiting room. Claire said, "It's fine, babe. You overthink furniture now?" and laughed. But I couldn't shake it. That chair was aimed at the bed, not at the window, not at the TV. Us. I woke up sometime after midnight. No sound woke me, just something. A jolt in my chest, like my body already knew I wasn't alone. The room was pitch dark. The fire had gone out. I lay there trying not to breathe too loud, eyes open, heart slamming so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I felt it. That pressure. That deep crawling sensation that someone's standing just at the edge of the dark, staring at you. I listened for minutes. Nothing. No footsteps, no wind. Just that thick mountain silence pressing in. Finally, I told myself I was being paranoid, just mountain nerves, and somehow drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to start the day with ghost stories, but Claire looked pale over breakfast. Her coffee sat untouched. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated, looked down, and then forced a smile. "Just a nightmare. What about?" She exhaled through her nose. "I dreamed that someone was sitting in that chair, just watching us. I woke up and I swear for a second I saw someone there, sitting so still I thought I was still dreaming. I didn't even blink. I felt every hair on my neck stand up." She noticed my face go white. "What? It's just a dream, Danny, don't—" I interrupted. I woke up too. Around midnight. I didn't see anyone, but her voice cracked. "You woke up?" "You didn't. Danny, don't. Please, just stop." She tried to laugh it off, but her hand was shaking. She wouldn't look at that chair again. Neither did I. We tried to forget it, went hiking most of the day, long, muddy trails, no phone signal, no other hikers. Just the sound of wind in the trees and the creak of wet branches. By the time we got back, the light was already fading. I made sure every door and window was locked, and I even slid a chair under the front doorknob like my dad used to do when we camped. We were both so tired we didn't talk much. Just crawled into bed and passed out cold. The next morning I woke first. Sunlight was spilling through the window, and for a second it felt normal again. Then I saw the door unlocked, not just unlocked. The handle turned, bolt drawn, chain unhooked. I just stared at it, my stomach flipping over itself. I knew I had locked that door. Claire had watched me. "Claire," I whispered. She stirred. The door. Look." Her eyes opened slowly, followed my finger, and when she saw it, her whole body stiffened. "No," she whispered. "No, I watched you." "I know." Her breathing started to quicken. "Did you go out last night? Maybe you—" "Claire, I didn't move. I swear to God, I didn't move." She sat up, hugging the blanket tight around her. Then she stopped, clapped a hand over her mouth. We just sat there. staring at that open door. After breakfast, in which neither of us touched, we agreed to check the place out just to make sure. It felt ridiculous, but we couldn't just sit there shaking. That's when Claire noticed the crack. It was right by the kitchen counter, a narrow line running floor to ceiling in the wood paneling. At first glance, it looked like just another seam. But when I leaned in close, I could see the edges didn't match, like the wood wasn't joined but cut. "Danny," she whispered. That's not normal, right?" I pressed against it. The wood gave slightly, like something behind it wasn't solid. Claire took a step back. "Don't," but I was already gripping the edge, pulling. The panel creaked, resisted, then shifted, and a cold gust of stale air poured out. Behind it was a door. Small, narrow, old, and when I pulled it open, the smell hit us. Rot, damp wood, something sour and human. A staircase led down into darkness. We stood frozen. My phone flashlight flicked on and I aimed it down. At the bottom, a small concrete room, no windows. No furniture except an old stained mattress in one corner. Next to it, a metal bucket. And in the corner opposite, what looked like wrappers and bones, chicken bones maybe, piled in a dented tin pan. Claire's voice broke. "Oh my God, Daniel. Someone's been living here." I couldn't even answer. My hands were shaking so bad the light trembled across the wall. There were handprints, dark, greasy ones, near the stairs like someone had climbed up and down recently. Claire grabbed my arm. "Close it. Please, close it. Let's just go." I hesitated. "What if he's still—" Her eyes darted around the room, wide and wet. "Close it, Daniel." I slammed the panel shut. We threw clothes into bags, barely zipped them, shoved everything into the trunk. We ran back to the car. I looked back once, and I swear I saw movement in one of the windows. Just a flicker of shadow, someone ducking away from the light. Claire saw it too. Her hand dug into my arm. Go now." Neither of us spoke until we hit the main highway. We called the owner first. He didn't ask questions, didn't sound surprised. Just said, "I'll refund you fully," and hung up. That was the moment I knew he'd known all along. We went to the police after that. They said they'd send someone up, but we never heard anything back. A few weeks later, I checked the rental site. The cabin was gone, completely erased. My name's James Ray, and I've lived in the mountains my whole damn life. Born and raised in a stretch of West Virginia, where the fog rolls in thick and the hollers hold more secrets than most folks would ever care to know. Out here you grow up learning to listen. The woods talk. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they scream. And if you're smart, you learn when to keep still and when to run. This all happened back in the summer of 1988. And I swear on my mother's grave, I still don't understand what really went down out there. I was 34 at the time, working for myself, doing construction and roofing jobs. Business was steady, so I decided to take a week off and head south into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Somewhere I'd never hiked before. I'd heard stories about the stretch near the North Carolina line. Quiet, remote, thick forest where the ridges fold over one another like waves. The kind of place that swallows sound. I left early that July morning, my old Chevy pickup loaded with gear. The plan was simple. Spend 4 days hiking a section off the main trail, camping where no one else would be, then loop back north and drive home. No big expectations, just me and the trees. It took about 7 hours of driving and one night sleeping in the truck before I hit the trailhead. The parking lot was half empty, a few other vehicles, hikers coming and going. But once I was a couple miles in, I stopped seeing people altogether. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. The Appalachians have their own kind of silence. It isn't empty. It's dense, like the woods are holding their breath. Every now and then I'd catch the sharp echo of a branch snapping far off, or the soft rush of wind weaving through oak and birch. I remember thinking how alive it all felt. I had no idea what kind of life was waiting out there. By the second night, I'd veered off any marked trail, just following my map and compass, doing what I'd done since I was a kid. I found a small clearing by a creek and pitched my tent under a leaning poplar. The air was thick and still, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin even after sunset. I built a small fire, cooked some beans and jerky, and leaned back, listening to cicadas shriek in the dark. But after a while, something shifted. The sound changed. The woods got too quiet. I remember brushing it off at first. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a deer bedding down or a raccoon nosing through brush. But my gut started to tighten. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the light, scattered kind you get from animals. These were slow, deliberate, heavy, crunching through leaves maybe 20 yards off. "Who's there?" I barked. My voice cracked the silence louder than I meant it to. It echoed through the trees and died quick. Nothing answered. I waited, every muscle in me tight, pistol in hand. Then, just as I started to think maybe I'd imagined it, something moved again. Closer this time. "Don't screw around." I barked again, my throat dry. "You picked the wrong camp to sneak up on." Silence. Not a bird. Not a breeze. That's when I started to get that prickling feeling. The one that crawls up the back of your neck like you're standing too close to something alive but unseen. I told myself to breathe, to think rational. Probably just another hiker passing through, right? Maybe lost, maybe curious. Still, I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam through the trees. Just black trunks and brush. Nothing. I stood there a long while until my pulse slowed, then sat back by the fire. But I never really relaxed again that night. By around midnight, I was lying in my tent, half asleep, when a new sound jerked me awake. It was faint at first, and a crackle, then a hum, like static from a radio. Then through that noise, a foinenau. I swear to God it was a man's voice whispering, distorted and unnatural, like something recorded and slowed down. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm, a low, repeating murmur that rose and fell like breathing. "What the hell?" I whispered, sitting up. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The sound was coming from outside, maybe 20 feet from my tent. I unzipped the flap slowly, careful not to make noise, and shined my flashlight toward the trees. The voice cut out. I stepped outside, gun in hand, scanning the dark. Then it started again. Same distorted murmur, only this time I saw where it was coming from. There was an old radio lying on the ground by the creek, a battered thing, half buried in moss, speaker hissing as it played that warped, whispering loop. "What in the hell is this?" I muttered, edging closer. My instincts were screaming, "Trap!" The hair on my arms stood up. I aimed the flashlight into the trees around me and shouted, my voice raw and sharp. "You think this is funny? You come out right now." "I'm armed, damn it." Nothing. The woods just swallowed my voice and spat it back in fragments. Then, snap. A twig broke behind me. I spun around fast, pistol raised. "You move one more damn inch and I'll drop you where you stand." Nothing moved. I could feel sweat dripping down my temple. My breathing sounded too loud. I took one step back toward the tent, then another. That's when I heard a buzz, a faint vibration from inside my tent. I froze. It was a phone, but I hadn't brought one. I moved slow, unzipping the flap, gun still in my right hand. My flashlight beam landed on a small, matte black flip phone, sitting right under my sleeping bag, still vibrating. The screen lit up, and a message blinked across it. "We're outside. It doesn't matter that you're armed. You've got nowhere to go." My blood turned to ice. The word "we" hit me hardest. I stumbled backward, my voice breaking into a bark, half rage, half panic. "Who the hell are you?" I roared into the dark. "You think you can scare me? You come on then. Come on." Nothing. Just the woods, wide and silent, watching. I could feel my hands trembling. I'd been in plenty of bad spots before, storms, animal attacks, even a drunk hunter once. But nothing like this. This was planned. This was personal. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed what I could, Pack, flashlight, pistol, and bolted into the trees. I ran blind through the dark. I must have run for an hour before I collapsed by a rocky creek bed, lungs burning. I crouched low, keeping my back to the rocks, and waited. Every few minutes I'd hear something faint and a branch snap, a whisper of movement, and I'd bark out again, hoarse and shaking. "You sons of bitches want me? Come find me." But no one ever answered. By the time dawn finally bled through the treetops, I was covered in sweat and dirt. I followed that creek downstream for hours. A passing farmer gave me a ride to the nearest town. I filed a report, told them everything. The deputy looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe me or call the local doctor. They sent a search team back to where I'd marked the map. 2 days later, they called me. Said they found nothing. No trace that anyone else had been there. Just my old tent, torn down and the ground raked smooth, like someone had tried to erase every sign I'd ever been there. I've gone over it 1,000 times since. Maybe a group of locals with nothing better to do? I don't know. Everything I'm about to tell you happened last year. I hadn't planned to go looking for anything strange. I just wanted 2 quiet weeks away from everything. 2 guys from my gym had rented a cabin out in the Smoky Mountains a few months earlier, and both of them swore they'd go back in a heartbeat. So when I finally worked up the nerve to take some time off, I checked out prices and found one that looked perfect. Remote. Cozy, simple. I booked it without thinking twice. When I arrived, I was surprised by how nice it was for the cost. A frame build, tucked into a slope that overlooked miles of pine and oak. It was cleaner than expected too. No musty cabin smell, no cobwebs. Just quiet. The car was parked nearly a 45-minute hike down the trail, which didn't bother me at first. It felt freeing. No cell service, no traffic, no people. Just the woods and me. But looking back now, that isolation, that dead quiet, and should have been my first warning. That first night, after a day spent unpacking and cooking, I sat by the little window with a paperback and a mug of coffee. The light outside faded fast. In the mountains, twilight doesn't really ease you into darkness. It drops on you all at once. I'd just gotten a few pages in when something moved past the window. It was quick, just a flicker of motion, but enough to freeze me mid-breath. The kind of instinctive stop where every muscle goes rigid before your brain can even reason why. I waited, listened. Nothing but the faint hum of crickets and the slow drip of water off the roof. After maybe a minute, I walked over and looked out. The glass was cold beneath my fingertips. Beyond the cabin, the trees were thick, pressed together like a dark wall. Their outlines swayed in the faint breeze, and the night had swallowed the trail whole. It was black out there, the kind of black that didn't end, that made you feel like the woods went on forever. After a while, I actually smiled. Probably just a deer, or my own reflection. "Get a grip, Lucas," I muttered. "First night, don't start jumping at shadows." I closed the curtains, told myself it was nothing, and tried to focus on my book again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been watched, just for a moment, from the dark between the trees. That night I woke around 4 a.m. It was like someone had called my name, sharp, right next to my ear. "Lucas." I sat straight up, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. For a second I was sure someone was in the cabin, but the silence that followed was so thick it almost hurt to breathe. I got up, flicked on the bathroom light, and splashed water on my face. My reflection looked pale, twitchy. I told myself it was just a dream. Maybe I'd heard a branch scrape the wall or an owl call weirdly. Maybe my brain had filled in the blanks, but the feeling stayed. I peered out the upstairs window before lying back down. The forest was still, too still. The moonlight barely reached through the treetops, and beyond that first layer of trunks, it was just blackness. When I finally fell asleep again, I dreamed of footsteps circling the cabin. It went on like that for 4 nights straight, every night. Same time, 4 a.m. sharp. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I'd heard someone call my name. Always the same tone, calm, almost patient. During the days, everything seemed normal. I'd hike, make coffee, read outside, and tell myself the nights were just a bad adjustment to the silence. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I wasn't used to being this alone, but each night, the dread crept in earlier. By the 5th night, I'd started counting down the hours until dark, like I was waiting for something inevitable. That 5th night is burned into me. I woke again, but this time, I was already half conscious when it happened. I heard the voice clearly, outside the window. Lucas. It wasn't muffled. It wasn't distant. It was right there, just beneath the window frame. I froze. My pulse hammered so hard it hurt my ribs. I didn't imagine that. I couldn't have. I waited maybe a full minute before whispering, "Who's there?" The silence that followed was heavy. I thought maybe I'd scared myself into hearing things. But then it came again. Lucas, same tone. But now it sounded almost familiar, like someone I'd known once years ago. A voice from childhood maybe, or a relative I hadn't spoken to in forever. I swallowed hard and said louder, "Who's out there?" There was a pause, long, deliberate. And then the voice said, clear as day, "Don't you remember me?" The air in the room changed. It felt colder, denser, like the whole cabin was holding its breath. I stepped toward the window, drawn without thinking. Every rational part of me screamed, "Don't," but something deeper, something I can't explain, wanted to see who it was. My hand touched the latch, then I heard it move, leaves crunching, slow, heavy steps, circling the cabin. The voice came again, but from the other side now, closer. "Come outside." That's when instinct kicked in hard. Something primal told me, if you open that door, you're not coming back. I backed away from the window, grabbed the little hatchet I'd brought for firewood, and stood there in the middle of the room listening. My throat was tight, my chest burning. The steps stopped right below me. I could feel the presence then, scraping, like fingernails or maybe a knife dragged along the wood siding, a slow, deliberate sound that traced the whole length of the cabin wall. "Lucas," it whispered again, softer this time, closer. I wanted to shout, to bark something back, but the sound stuck in my throat. All I could do was whisper through clenched teeth, "You stay the hell away from me." Silence, and then, faintly, almost teasing, I heard it laugh, just a low, breathy sound that made my stomach turn cold. I didn't move the rest of the night. I sat in the corner by the bed with my back to the wall, the hatchet resting on my knees. My eyes stayed locked on that window until dawn broke. When light finally seeped through the trees, the world looked normal again. The birds were singing. The air was bright. But when I went outside, the dirt beneath the window was disturbed. Prints, maybe. Not boots, bare feet. They circled the whole cabin. I'd packed everything that morning and left without looking back. I haven't told anyone about that week until now. I was embarrassed. I thought maybe I'd lost it, that the solitude had gotten to me. But last month, scrolling through a local forum, I read a post from another hiker. Same area, same pattern. They said they'd woken up every night to someone calling their name from the woods. I don't know what's in those woods. It's been 5 years since that month up at Lake Meldon. That week wasn't supposed to be anything memorable. My uncle owns a line of old rental cabins tucked deep in the Appalachian foothills. 9 of them, all built sometime in the late 60s. They sit along the lakeshore in a slow, sagging row facing the water. When I was a kid, my parents would take me up there for summers. Mosquito bites, smoky campfires, the smell of wet pine and lake scum. The place had a charm back then, but only because I didn't know how alone it really was. Last fall, my uncle called asking for a favor. He'd had shoulder surgery and couldn't do the annual winterizing trip. Every October, he went up to drain the pipes, clear out vermin, and lock the cabins down before the snow came. He told me it would be easy. Just a week or so, quiet work, good pay, free stay in the main cabin near the dock. At the time, I was restless. Between jobs, drinking too much coffee, sleeping too little, I told myself a week alone in the woods might clear my head. So I said yes. I remember the drive up more vividly than I should. The roads got narrower the deeper I went, shoulders fading into woods, the pavement cracking, then turning to gravel. GPS gave up 20 minutes before I reached the lake. I followed handwritten directions on the back of an envelope my uncle mailed me. Turn left at the fallen signpost, right past the rusted tractor. It was like following a ghost map. I reached Lake Meldon. The sun was low. The cabins looked smaller than I remembered. The lake itself was still. Too still. Not peaceful, not even beautiful. Just flat. For the first 2 days it was fine. Peaceful even. I spent the mornings walking the line of cabins with my notebook, checking for leaks, sweeping porches, shining my flashlight into dusty corners for mouse nests. The cabins all looked the same. Same layout, same creaky floors, same faded curtains. Each one had its own stillness, the kind that sinks into your bones after too much quiet. At night I cooked small meals, read by the fireplace, and watched the water through the window. There were no boats, no other people, just the sigh of wind through the pines and the groan of the old dock shifting in the cold. I slept better than I had in months. Then, on the third morning, I noticed it. Cabin 3. One of the wooden chairs had been moved. It sat at the window instead of the table, angled slightly toward the lake like someone had been sitting there watching. I froze when I saw it, not terrified, just thrown off. I'd been in there the day before, and I was certain I hadn't left it like that. Still, I convinced myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe I'd bumped it. Maybe I'd remembered wrong. I moved it back, tight against the wall, and wrote a note in my log. But the next morning it was there again. Same chair, same position, same silent angle toward the lake. That's when the air started feeling heavy, like the kind of pressure before a thunderstorm, except no storm ever came. I took a photo this time, shoved the chair back against the wall and locked up, but my hands shook when I turned the key. By afternoon, I'd made it to cabin 7, the one furthest up the hill. The air was cooler up there, darker. A dying pine leaned against the roof like it wanted to crush the place. When I opened the door, I stopped breathing. Every dish, every cup, every glass from the small kitchen had been laid out on the table. Not scattered, arranged. A perfect grid. Each one evenly spaced, spotless, gleaming like they'd just been washed. No dust anywhere. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching sunlight fall through the window onto that strange display. There was no sound, no wind, no bugs, no movement. Just that quiet arrangement waiting for me to notice. Something about it felt wrong in a deep, bone-level way. Not human wrong. Wrong like instinct, the way you feel when you're being hunted. I didn't touch anything at first. Then slowly I put each item back where it belonged. Every clink of glass felt like it echoed too long in that cabin. By the time I stepped out, my shirt was stuck to my back with cold sweat. That night I couldn't focus on reading. Every creak of the main cabin made me flinch. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound I still hear in my dreams, a door slamming. Not the gentle rattle of wind, not an animal bumping something loose. It was sharp, deliberate, like someone had shut it with force. The sound rolled across the lake, echoed, then vanished into silence. I grabbed my flashlight, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside. The air was like ice. My breath came out white and short. I swept the beam across the cabins. The lake reflected nothing. The woods were black silhouettes pressing close, too close. No movement. No sound. I stayed out there too long, waiting for something to happen. When nothing did, I went back inside, locked every bolt, and sat in the chair by the window until dawn. The next morning, I almost didn't do my rounds. But part of me wanted answers. Cabin 4 broke that. Its padlock was hanging open. The door cracked just enough for a hand to slip through. I knew I'd locked it. I remembered the click, the weight of the key in my palm. When I pushed the door open, the smell hit me first. Cold, damp earth. Inside, the floor was marked with muddy, bare footprints. Large ones. The prints led from the threshold to the ladder that went up to the loft bed. but there were no prints returning. Just that one set stopping at the ladder. I aimed my flashlight up. The beam shook in my hand. The bed was neat. The sheets smooth. The pillow clean. No sign anyone had been there, and yet those prints were fresh, still glistening. I backed out slowly, one step at a time, never turning my back to the ladder. When I finally reached the door, I pulled it shut, locked it, then found some old rope and tied the latch 3 times. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I skipped the rest of the cabins. I sat on the dock most of the day, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. There wasn't. By dusk, I decided I'd do one last round, make sure everything was sealed, and then I'd leave before sunrise. The first few cabins were quiet, empty. The woods had gone utterly still, even the birds silent. When I reached cabin 3 again, I felt it before I even turned the handle. A kind of low hum in my chest, like my heartbeat had synced with something waiting inside. The door creaked as I opened it, and there it was. The chair was back by the window, same slight angle facing the lake. But this time there were 2 chairs, identical, side by side. Both pulled close together, perfectly aligned, as if whoever had been sitting there wasn't alone anymore. I stood frozen in the doorway. Then slowly I realized both chairs were wet. Water had pooled beneath them, dark stains soaking into the wood floor as if they'd just been lifted from the lake. That was my breaking point. I didn't step inside. I didn't even breathe. I pulled the door shut, turned the key, and started walking. Fast. Then running. Down the path toward the main cabin. When I reached the main cabin, I didn't care about the checklist, the locks, or the tools. I threw everything into my duffel. Books, clothes, half my groceries, didn't even fold them. I didn't bother taking off my boots. I just grabbed my keys and ran for the truck. As I backed out, my headlights swept across the line of cabins one last time. And I swear, God help me, I saw 2 shapes sitting in the window of cabin 3. I didn't tell my uncle what really happened. I just said the place needed more work than I could handle. He didn't ask questions. I haven't been back since.